All right, welcome everybody to the pre-draft edition of Under the Dome. The draft is actually Thursday night, the first round, second and third round Friday nights, and Saturday during the day is the fourth through the seventh round. I've been doing my little draft preview, and I just can't believe that there was a time where it was all in one day, and there were 17 rounds to the draft. Can you imagine what that must have been like? I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with my partner, Sean, who I think is broadcasting from the bathroom. Are you in the men's room tonight, Sean?
No, as a matter of fact, I am in the spacious Two Dudes Studios, actually. I am at the restaurant where I work, Two Dudes Brew and Q in Monroe, Louisiana. And I just want to put out there, anybody in Northeast Louisiana that wants to experience the draft in a special kind of way, we'll be having an event here broadcasting the first round of the draft. Everybody should come by. Best barbecue that you'll ever put in your mouth, too.
There's a slogan for you. No, at least you can say the best meat you put in your mouth, but that's another topic altogether.
Well,
I'm just dying.
there is talk that staff is going to have special shirts made up that say "We rub our own meat," but that's another subject for another time.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
We want to thank everyone for joining us tonight for this special pre-draft show. And before I pay the bills, I want to explain. Everybody's been hitting me up constantly this week, wanting to know what was going on. It's really hard for us to put together the expanded draft coverage like we normally do when it doesn't involve the Saints. And the Saints, at this point in time, don't have a pick until the second round. So this year, we kind of scaled it back. We have two very special guests joining us tonight that I'll introduce momentarily. And we want to thank everyone for joining us. It's going to be us, and it's going to be our unique twist to everything, as always. We want to thank Fan First Productions for sponsoring us. Invite you guys to subscribe to our show on iTunes and on YouTube. And moving right along, I'm going to have to introduce this guy in a different way because normally I call him my brother from another mother, and the other member of the Under the Dome staff. But due to this man's hard work and good work, his work stands on its own. The host of the Bayou Blitz and writer for Canal Street Chronicles, Bob Rose. How are you doing tonight, Bob?
Humbled after that introduction, gentlemen. And I thank you both very much. You both become such good friends and definitely mentors of mine. And it's an honor to work with you and be on with you every time you have me on. And this time of year is always exciting for all of us, as you know. But it's by far the busiest media-wise every single one of us are during the course of the year. So much busier than during the season and everything like that because so many different scenarios are running through. But it's a really fun time of year, and we'll all be fried by this time Saturday evening. But right now it's fun.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, we were just kind of going over the various scenarios, and this is the first draft probably since maybe Jamarcus Russell. Could probably go back further to the 1988 draft when the Atlanta Falcons had the number one overall pick, and I think it was Andre Bruce. That they really have no consensus number one pick. I mean, everyone thinks that Kyler Murray is going to go number one overall, but if the Cardinals decide they're going to stick with Rosen, that kind of throws the whole draft up in the air. And that's what we were talking about a little bit off the air. What do you think would happen if the Cardinals just go ahead and take, say, a defensive lineman like a Nick Bosa or a tight end or a receiver or something else in the first round? Bob, I'll ask you first.
And like you said, we were talking a little bit off of the air and kind of playing with those potential scenarios for the last week or so. First and foremost, I do think that the Cardinals will end up drafting Kyler Murray. Whether I think it's the right thing to do or not is kind of irrelevant. But let's go with your hypothetical and say that they don't. Say that they remain in the number one spot and go Bosa or anybody else. The 49ers have the number 2 pick. The Jets, who are publicizing that they want to move down from that anyway, the Jets hold the number 3 pick. The 49ers have their quarterback. The Jets have their quarterback. Oakland has been making all kinds of moves, whether it's a cat and mouse game or not. Who knows with the Oakland Raiders? We know that the Dolphins, the Redskins, and even the Broncos, and certainly the Giants are all in play for a quarterback, and all sit in the top half of the first round. So that makes them all legitimate players. I think it becomes a free-for-all at that point to try to get to the number 2 and or number 3 spot to move to get not only Kyler Murray, but then all of a sudden, what's going to happen with Dwayne Haskins and what's going to happen with the kid out of Missouri, Locke. And I think that that's going to be must-see TV. You almost hope from morbid curiosity that the Cardinals don't take Murray just to see that brawl.
Absolutely.
Figuratively speaking. We're in a daytime or a nighttime soap opera TV era right now, and that's as good as reality TV as good as reality TV gets.
And Sean, I'm gonna go to you in just a second, but I don't know if you guys remember, and I've been watching the draft since 1988. That was probably the first year I really sat and watched the whole thing, and the Saints took Craig Ironhead Hayward that year. But do you guys remember? I want to say it was the draft with Byron Leftwich was in it, and the Minnesota Vikings thought they had a trade done, and the 15 minutes expired, and they didn't make a pick. So the rules say if you don't make a pick, the next team can go up there and start putting get his guy in, and then the next guy can go bring his guy in as long as until the Vikings decide they're going to make a pick. Well, when the Vikings essentially passed, that's when the Jacksonville raced up to get Byron Leftwich. That's when you saw I forgot who the next team was. Who was it?
Yeah.
Baltimore. Baltimore did it? Was it Baltimore? Yeah. Okay.
Baltimore and Jacksonville. I don't know who came first, but yeah, Jacksonville ended up with Leftwich.
Yeah.
You're right. 2 teams basically ran, showed a nice 40 speed.
That's
and
it.
That podium and getting that card up there.
And speaking of draft memories, there was a draft way back in, I want to say either 92 or 93 when Sam Weiss was head of the Tampa Bay. They wrote the wrong name on the card. The caller called on the old helmet phones. The caller, the war room, I guess it wasn't called it that back then. That was a Jimmy Johnson thing. But whatever the war room was that they had for Tampa Bay back then, called and said, okay, we want this guy. And the person, I guess, heard someone else say a name and kind of blanked out for a minute, wrote the wrong name on the card, and they took that player in the draft. And, of course, everybody was like, whoa, where'd this guy come from and stuff? And, yeah, it was a miscommunication from the time the guy heard the name on the phone to writing the name on the card. So, yeah, that was classic stuff. And, of course, the Jets fans, which I miss terribly. I miss it being in New York. I miss the Jets fans. I miss the Jets fans being pissed off when they get the wrong player, or in their minds the wrong player. Yeah, that was all classic TV.
I love the way you worded that, when they get the wrong player.
They did.
We want to welcome in the other half of the Bayou Blitz now, Mr. Kyle Mosley. How are you doing, Kyle?
Well, you sound very professional there, Sean. Yes. How you doing? Hey, Al,
sound can be deceiving.
Well, good, man. Hey, thank you for inviting me on with you guys.
Well, As we stated earlier, we wanted to make it a smaller deal and kind of get more in depth with the different possibilities that could face the Saints. And we were just discussing whether or not we think that Arizona will actually go with Kyler Murray at the number 1 position. What are your thoughts on that?
I have my doubts. I do have some doubts there. Picking Rosen last year and now abandoning the project so soon is interesting, to say the least. But Kyler Murray is intriguing. It's an intriguing prospect where if they do not go with him and they stick with Rosen, then it looks like it's going to be Nick Bosa or who would be ready to make a deal to move up to number 1. I don't think too many teams really want to do that, but it wouldn't shock me if they decided not to select Kyler Murray in this draft. But just listening to all of the analysts, everybody's saying, let's go Kyler. But I have my doubts. I have my doubts with these guys.
If it were me, I'll just put it in that context. If I were the one making the decision, I would not go with Murray. You've got Josh Rosen, and he's serviceable, and you invested a first-round pick in him a year ago. You need to kind of see that out. You don't need chaos and confusion and quarterback controversy, especially with a first-year head coach. But now, on the other side of the coin, let me further say that, as I was telling the guys off the air, the wild card in this whole scenario is going to be the Arizona's first-year head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, because Kingsbury, while he was at Texas Tech, was able to thrive with the, for lack of a better word to use, the prototypical Big 12 quarterback like your Pat Mahomes, your Baker Mayfield, and your Kyler Murray. There's no doubt that Murray is an exceptional athlete, both on the football field and on the baseball field. But I don't know if he would translate over to being a successful pocket passer. But if there is a coach in the league that could use him to optimum results, it would have to be Kingsbury. So it's going to be interesting. And speaking more to what you were saying about them taking Rosen, Rosen has got to be the most unlucky guy in the world because he got drafted by a coach that got fired.
He's not the first.
Yeah.
He's not the first.
So, I mean, it's not his fault. You can go back and watch the show from a year ago. I was not a Josh Rosen fan, but I mean, he can play, and it's looking up. If it were me making the decision for the Arizona Cardinals, I would almost have to feel like you need to invest in that defense.
Here's the thing I think, and this goes to what you were talking about, Sean. With Cliff Kingsbury, I feel like you're taking almost like what Detroit did back in the late 80s when they took Andre Ware and they got Mouse Davis to run that offense. The University of Houston ran that run-and-shoot scheme. So you drafted a quarterback that was successful in a run-and-shoot scheme, thinking they can play the run-and-shoot kind of offense that University of Houston was doing in college at the pro level. Kingsbury is going to think he can take that Texas Tech kind of offense and run it in the NFL. So you want to bring in a quarterback like a Kyler Murray who can run that kind of system, as opposed to a Josh Rosen who is more of a traditional drop-back passer. I don't think that's a good recipe for success. I really don't, because
I agree completely.
There's a reason why the field is smaller in the NFL than it is in college football. And what I mean by smaller is the hash marks are in further than they are in college ball. College ball, they're out here. High school ball, they're way out here. So there is no wide side of the field for guys who, remember when Reggie Bush was playing for the Saints, he constantly tried to break it to the outside, because in college, he could always get that corner and beat the angle on the players, on the defensive players, and take off. And that's where his speed worked. Well, he would try it in the NFL. The problem is because the ball is really close to the center of the field is cut in half for him. So when he would try and take it to the outside or get that corner, he never could get the angle, the same angles he got in college football. That's just one of the many things that's different about college football than pro football. So if you're going to try and run this system, you want to take Kyler Murray, but you've got to make sure this system works. And that's where I think the real dilemma is for Arizona.
And I think if you're smart and you look at this realistically speaking, and you put a historical perspective on it, it never has worked before. Just like you just said about Detroit trying to use the run and shoot. Probably the most successful team to ever do it was the Houston Oilers, and it was minimal amount of success at best.
Well, you ran into trouble in the red zone when the field would be compressed.
Yeah.
You needed those extra blockers to protect your quarterback. You needed a running game. But anyway, we're kind of veering off a little bit, but I think that's the fundamental issue for Arizona with Kyler Murray. Are you going to take a quarterback that seems to fit your system that you want to run, but will that system work in the NFL?
Alan, great points. I just think this organization is in disarray.
Mm-hmm. I do too. I agree totally.
Steve, what is it? Kim ever since his ascension to the post, it really hasn't worked,
Mm-hmm.
And these guys are making some critical decisions. You don't give a guy 1 year to really try to make it work in the NFL. And I thought it was a bad decision to get rid of Steve Wilkes as fast as they did. But I think it's even more so of a problem for the organization. It's a sign of a problem for the organization to look at Kingsbury to be the answer. I don't know. I'm not saying anything bad about him, and I want everyone to have tremendous success, limited success, but Saints first, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Let's be for real. He was not that great of a head coach in the college ranks.
Yeah.
So how do we know this is going to translate to high productivity and success in the National Football League? That's the problem I had. And not only that, Kingsbury did not even do well as a player. Remember, we had him on the squad in training camp.
Yeah.
It's just bewildering how the organization is being ran at this particular time.
I think that the Kingsbury deal it's a lot like the Sean McVay coaching tree. Everybody that touches the hem of his garment got a job this past year based on his success in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Cliff Kingsbury got a job in the NFL because he was responsible for presenting the NFL with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Everybody's looking for the next quarterback whisperer. Bob, anything you want to add to this?
No, no. You guys said it all. I don't. Looking at Kyler Murray, the player, he was electric in college. I don't know if he has the fundamental game to be a fast success in the NFL anyway. And we know the way that this league is set up nowadays. Well, you look at the other poor kid in Arizona, Rosen. If you aren't instantly putting video game type numbers, you're all of a sudden being labeled as a bust. especially at the quarterback position. And I think that the Kyler Murray learning curve is going to take a couple of years. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad player. I don't believe he's going to have a lot of success early on. Now, we all know it all depends on what kind of system that quarterback goes into. And if Kingsbury does indeed try to implement the system that he ran at Texas Tech, or at least aspects of it, Murray is probably best suited for that kind of smoke and mirrors system until NFL defenses start to catch up with it, which in this league usually only takes a quarter to a half a season. So he might look really pretty coming out of the gate with this run and gun type of system, similar to what we saw out of RG3. But even in Robert Griffin's rookie year, the second half of that year, now, of course, Griffin struggled with injuries a bit, but defenses were starting to catch up to him, realize that all they need to do is keep him in the pocket. We're going to see that kind of thing with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. I look for the same kind of thing out of Kyler Murray. So if it's me, gentlemen, for slightly different reasons than what all of you guys outlined, if I'm the Arizona Cardinals, I don't take Kyler Murray because of that. I have my quarterback who has a year in the league already, a year maybe not, certainly not in the same system, but with those offensive players around him. And I'm trying to build on that. I'm trying to give him weapons. I'm trying to build on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I try to entice as many teams as we can, and we just gave you a short list of teams that might want to move into number one or at least draft Murray. That's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to dangle and get an Oakland Raider or a New York Giant or a Miami Dolphin or a Washington Redskin to move into that number one spot and pick up some valuable additional picks, not only this year, but probably next year as well.
Absolutely.
And one more thing I'd like to say. I have a fundamental issue, and I said this the year that Chicago drafted Trubisky. I have a fundamental issue with handing the keys to my organization to a quarterback that has had 1 year or less experience as a starting quarterback.
Yeah.
That you can't waste a commodity like a first pick in the draft on that big a gamble. It's not a safe bet.
Yeah, you sound like Bill Parcells there. And that's what old Bill would say as well. And and if I can just chime in one last time, Alan.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's going to be more of a run and shoot type of offense that he's going to implement. I think it's going to be more, if they choose Kyler Murray, it would be to their benefit to look at the success of Russell Wilson and pattern an offense around how Russell Wilson was very successful, right? So right now, if you try to do the running shoot or the Texas Tech style of play that Kingsbury implemented there, it's going to be detrimental to that young man's career.
Absolutely.
It's going to be detrimental to Rosen's career if they decide to do the same thing.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. It's the spread, really. I mean, it's the run and shoot is really passe. There's some elements you see in the game of it, but it's just elements that only show up, in one or two plays. It's not an entire offensive philosophy.
Yeah. I think only us old guys call it the run and shoot, actually.
Yeah. Well, Miles Davis actually called it a silver stretch. That was his term. But, one of the things that you mentioned earlier, and I thought about this, remember when Drew Bledsoe and Rick Mirer came out in the draft 1-2, and Bledsoe actually struggled in his first year, his rookie year, whereas Rick Mirer really looked good his first year in Seattle. And one of the things that I heard when you go back and look at those two quarterbacks was that Rick Mirer had a very limited field vision. He didn't like to look to his left. He focused almost exclusively to his right. And in the beginning, he was very successful throwing that way. And then defenses, like you said earlier, defenses figured out what he liked to do and figured out pretty quickly he doesn't look to his left. So he started sending blitzes to his right to make him start to look to his left, and he was terrible. His accuracy was shot. And I'll tell you what, I don't know what Randy Mueller, the GM for the Seahawks back then, what kind of black magic hypnotism he could do, but he got 2 first-rounders out of the Chicago Bears.
Yep.
Dumping Rick Meyer on that. And he did it with the Saints, too. He got 2 first-rounders out of the Dolphins, Ricky Williams. So, I don't know what kind of voodoo spells he could do, but that was an incredible trade that he made. But, yeah, that when you were talking about that, about how defenses figure out rookies pretty quickly, that name came to mind immediately, Rick Meyer. So, okay, so we've kind of beat up that quarterback a good bit. Where do you think then, because a lot of people think this is going to be 3 or 4 quarterbacks going into this first round, where do you think the other quarterbacks go? You named, Bob, some of the teams that are interested in quarterbacks. Where in the ideal world do you think these quarterbacks should go?
In the ideal world,
Yeah.
I only see Haskins and Will Grier. Now, I'm an unabashed Will Grier fan. I only see Haskins and Will Grier being his top 10 values. Now, that's not what's going to happen. We're going to probably see 3 quarterbacks go in the top 10. It's going to be Haskins out of Ohio State, Kyler Murray, and probably Drew Lock out of Missouri. The kid from Duke, Daniel Jones, I think his last name is. He's probably going to go somewhere in the 12 to 15 range. Washington right now sits at pick number 15. That's probably going to be the cap as far as those top 4 quarterbacks. The 4th out of them is probably going to be no later than 15. And then you're going to have Grier, and there's a couple other guys that people might take a flyer on late in the first round. But I look more at realistically early to mid second round values. So we'll see those top 4 guys, I think, go in the top 15 somewhere. Maybe a Grier or a Jared Stidham from Auburn. Somebody who might grab one of them late in the first round, and then the other one of those 2 will go no later than the second round. I would expect.
Okay. Sean, question for you then. What for the Saints, what would be an ideal draft scenario where what would have to happen for the Saints to go, yes, we've got a lot of stuff coming towards us? I mean, we pick at 62. So what do you think needs to happen in the draft for that to work?
I have no idea.
Okay.
And that's the end of the show.
There we go. Okay. Kyle, I'll ask you that question because I have an idea, but I'm going to ask you this question.
Wait a minute. Back up a minute.
All right.
I'm not completely understanding what you're asking me.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me preface it this way.
Okay.
What do you think the Saints' needs are in the second round?
Okay. Well, by the time they get to if the Saints remain at that number 62 pick, by the time you get there, the whole top level and top tier of talent will be gone, obviously. So basically, you're not really going to looking for a specific position player because there's no way to map out a strategy 62 picks in. So you're going best player available. Ideally speaking, you have to think that maybe tight end is not such a position of need now that you got Jared Cook coming in. You never, in the past several seasons, you've never had enough defensive backs. You never have enough wide receivers, and you never have enough offensive linemen. I would like to see, as unpopular as this decision would be, I would like to see the Saints get another Ryan Ramczyk, a player that sturdy and that dependable and that good to add to the offensive line. I'm not really, as I said about Cook, I'm not really as concerned about the defensive line as I once was, thanks to all the free agents that we've been bringing in. Wide receiver, a number 2 to pair with Mike Thomas is definitely something that this team needed down the stretch a year ago. And unless Traquan Smith steps up in a big way in training camp this year, I don't see us having that player in-house because I think Ted Ginn is not going to be, from an injury standpoint, he's not going to be able to be depended on as he once was. We need wide receiver help, and we need probably one more shutdown. I hate that word, shutdown corner. One cover corner in the secondary.
Okay. All right. Kyle, I'm gonna go to you in just a second, but let me explain how I was looking at it. Well, I guess the answer I was looking for is kind of dovetailing what Bob was talking about. Let's just say for the Saints, an ideal draft would be that the bulk of the wide receivers, because I think they should take a wide receiver in the second round. The bulk of the wide receivers kind of get pushed down the draft, and they start falling to the top and the middle of the second round. Where
That's
you have
how we
a
got
lot
Thomas.
that's how you get a lot of receivers kind of going in that direction. That way, the Saints have the maximum choices that they really want to have. So if you've got 2 or 3 guys you've got ranked on the board pretty evenly, and those 3 guys are all falling, you don't feel the need to panic and make a trade to go up and go get a guy because he's not going to last past these teams. And the way I see that happening is, like Bob was saying, let's just say that 4 quarterbacks go in the top 15 picks. Okay, so if those quarterbacks are going, that means you now are starting to see a run possibly on defensive linemen, linebackers, and offensive linemen. That's good news for the Saints because that means tight ends are getting pushed further down the list. That means receivers getting pushed further down the list. Even running backs are coming down the list. You don't necessarily need to have a running back, but teams that might take a receiver you're interested in, but they see a running back fall, might jump on that running back instead of taking a receiver. So that's how, like you said, you can't plan out totally who's going to be available at 62, but you've got a list of names, a little cloud of names that you hope are there. And the more of those names stay in that cloud and don't come off the board, the better it is for the Saints. I guess that's what I was looking for. Kyle, what do you think?
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I was thinking the same thing. You always have 1 or 2 teams who will draft some questionable draft choice in the first round. Right?
The Raiders.
The Giants.
I really think the Giants are going to mess this draft up.
Okay. We lost.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You dropped your mic?
No. Just hold on 1 second. Can you hear me now, guys?
Absolutely.
All right. Sorry about that. So basically, I do agree with the fact that you will have some wide receiving talent to drop. You will also have some tight ends that will drop as well. It's kind of interesting to see Irv Smith has been dropping. The kid from Georgia, what's his name? Riley Ridley.
Yeah.
He's been dropping but if you look at his speed and his potential, that's one thing that I agree with you, Sean. We need to be able to try to put somebody into place that's going to give them some speed. We need to have some speed there. Ginn has done a great job. He's in his 30s. And we need to have somebody who could be able to take that top end off. If we get an opportunity to have one of those Ohio State guys, that might be an option as well. So,
Well, I'll probably go to sleep every night looking at a picture of Paris Campbell. So that's where my heart is right now. Because I just would love to see Michael Thomas and Paris Campbell side by side. I know a lot of guys like Debo Samuel. Riley is a popular one out of Georgia. But, it's funny because Irv Smith has gone from being a top 15 pick to they basically say he's got T-Rex arms and, doesn't run very good routes. All these things are talking him down. And I'm just watching him slide and slide and slide. I'm like, did you not watch Alabama?
exactly.
This is the problem with the combine. People fall in love with guys running around in T-shirt and shorts out there in the combine and look at the measurables and forget to watch when they play football. Phillips one time talked about Earl Campbell's slow 40 time. And he says, I know if we're ever on 3rd and 40, I'm not giving him the ball.
Yeah. Love it.
So, they forget about guys' ability to play football. And Irv Smith was a very successful tight end running those seam routes that the Saints love their tight ends to run. So, yeah, if he keeps falling, more power to him, man. That'd be awesome. I'd love to have another a son of a Saint on this team.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
And another thing about him, you look historically at players that are second generation, and their maturation process and transitioning into the league is always quick.
Yep.
As long as it's not Todd Marinovich, we're talking about, or Nick Toon, we're good.
Yeah. There is that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And you know what? I read this and I couldn't believe what I just read. The son of Mark Fields is in this draft.
Yeah,
The
Clemson.
son of Irv Smith is in this draft. And one other son, who else? Another former Saints son is in this draft. And I got married when we picked Mark Fields. That was my wedding day, April 22nd, 1995. So, am I officially that old? That now
You are.
Mark Fields is getting drafted in the league? That's unbelievable. That really is.
It's
Wow.
depressing.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe that. Okay. All right. So let's look at the NFC South then. I think Tampa is going to take the LSU kid White. No matter what else happens, unless White's off the board, Tampa is taking White right there. Where do you guys see? And we'll start with you, Bob. Where do you see the Falcons, the Bucks, and that other team, that blue team over there, Carolina? What do you think they're going to do in the first round?
I think they're first of all, over the last month, Kyle and I have had kind of a steel cage match of NFC South podcasts. We had guys from the Buccaneers, Locked On Bucks, James Yarko. We had a Falcons gentleman on, and we of course had Tony on from the C3 podcast, just to kind of pick their brain about the very question that you were asking.
Mhm.
I agree with you about where the Buccaneers are likely going to go with their first pick. I think it's going to be the linebacker from LSU, given what they lost in free agency.
Yeah.
And we kind of had the inside track through our podcast friends, and it looks like. Did you ask me specifically about the Panthers or Falcons?
All three. Just pick any of the ones that you know best. But all three
Okay.
teams.
It seems to us, we were hearing that both teams, both the Falcons and the Panthers, are likely to look at defensive linemen, specifically probably edge rushers in the first round. And if not someone on the edge defensively, then someone on the edge offensively. Both teams are kind of hurting at offensive tackle. So it looks like unless an elite skill position playmaker drops to either one of them, it looks like both teams are probably going to focus on one of the two lines, maybe with their top two picks, first and second round each.
I agree.
Well, my opinion about Tampa, they may go defensive line versus Devin White, especially with the situation with McCoy right now being so tenuous. They may try to get somebody to be able to bring in and fill in the hole. We don't know if they're going to let him go. We don't know if they're going to trade him. But it just doesn't seem like he's going to be there for the long term.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that Arians wants to keep him, but he respects the amount of time that he has with the organization, so he's not going to make this publicly ugly. But you guys know as well as I do that if a coach doesn't want you on that team, they can effectively phase you out without cutting you loose.
Well, the Bucks are going to a 34 defense. So, the question is, does McCoy fit that kind of defense? He can play defensive end, but is he really a two-gap defensive end kind of player, or is he mainly a one-gap 4-3 defensive tackle? And I think he's the latter. I think he's a 4-3 defensive tackle. I think he would struggle at his age, at 30, being a two-gap defensive lineman. And the Bucks don't have very many linebackers. They want to go to a 34 defense. They're going to need outside pass rushers. You've got Noah Fent. You don't know how he's going to play out still because he's been not Noah Fent. I'm sorry, that's a tight end. The guy the Bucks took a couple years ago. That Spence. Thank you. I knew it was Noah. I had that part right. But yeah, they've got him, who was an undersized defensive end. They're probably going to try him out as an outside linebacker. But you really, outside of David, and I think the LSU linebacker, do they still Quan Alexander on that team? Or they lost? Okay. So, they're going to probably try and bring another LSU linebacker, familiarity and trying to run that kind of scheme. But I do agree. I do think they're going to look at a defensive end to try and push McCoy out the door. Vedeve is going to play the big nose tackle in that scheme. The other two teams, the Falcons and the Panthers, I think they're looking at offensive linemen. I really do. I think, the Falcons' offensive line is a mess, and we already know, speed bump McCoy, as Cam Jordan refers to him. He's gone from Carolina, so they're going to be looking for offensive tackle over there, try and protect their quarterbacks. Sean, how do you see the NFC South playing out? Do you see any surprises on there? Any sexy picks that you think they're going to go for?
Not unless it's a scenario like we discussed earlier where Kyler Murray doesn't go one, and that throws everything into complete chaos. Unless, like I believe it was you that said this, unless a shiny toy falls to them, I see them bucking the system to try to make some outlandish pick. They're gonna almost have to go with something safe.
Yeah, I totally agree. And for Atlanta, for me, their big question mark is number 44, their pass rusher for 1 year wonder. What do the Falcons do with him? Is this a make or break year for him?
I believe so.
Our guy that we had on with us last week, he mentioned that the Falcons had just exercised the option year on Beasley's contract. Dan Quinn, Coach Dan Quinn of the Falcons, is kind of hitching his wagon to whether Beasley is a success or failure. But guys, we all know too, the old saying, and I think Parcells coined it: you can never have too much of, and the answer is usually too much speed, too many good cover cornerbacks, or too many pass rushers. So I agree with you guys. If the Falcons, and I'm inclined to agree with you too. I believe that the Falcons will go just like the Panthers with an offensive tackle in the with their first round pick. But I would be very, very surprised if they didn't shoot for a pass rusher, some sort of edge rusher, with their second round selections.
Yeah, I totally.
If you really think about it, I don't think it's too far outside the realm of possibility that you think about both Dan Quinn and Ron Rivera being very close to being on the hot seat.
Oh, yeah.
So they need to kind of knock it out of the park with this draft.
Mm-hmm.
I think Quinn more than Rivera right now. I think Quinn really is in a hot seat because of the talent he has on offense. Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, well, guys, I think they both should draft quarterback. So,
okay,
I can't argue that.
Yeah, let's just waste these picks on some quarterback. No, to be honest with you, man, Ed Oliver, and I've watched this kid for the past 3 years here in Houston, man. He is a unique talent, and if they need to have somebody to get after the quarterback, he's their man. Now, today, the big guy just signed that $15 million franchise deal with the Falcons.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're going to look at trying to get some depth there as well, but if one of those edge rushers start to fall, it may mean they may try to look at one of those guys. I don't know if Sweat is going to fall. I doubt it with his speed, but you got that kid from Clemson, Farrell, who looks pretty good. You have Gary from Michigan, looks pretty good. So I don't know, man. I just know, and I kind of feel the same way. I think Rivera is on the hot seat, to be honest with you guys. He has to produce something. Cam Newton has to have one of the better years for himself this year. So will they find some toys for him to actually be productive? They have been having some minor success at wide receiver, but I think they need to possibly look at a wide receiver.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I can see, as this is the kind of thing that a team like Carolina would do, I could see them just, if DK Metcalf is sitting right there when they come up on the clock, going just the hell with it. Run up there and bring that card.
Right.
Get something flashy out there for all of our fans. Because, yeah, their receiving corps stinks. It is terrible. I mean, their whole offense basically was Cam Newton giving the ball to McCaffrey.
Yeah.
That was it. If McCaffrey didn't have the ball, Cam Newton had the ball. Samuel hasn't turned out the way they wanted. They've got nothing else outside of him. And they have no tight end left. I think Greg Olson has retired, so their offense, they need a lot of help on the offense.
And realistically speaking, you're not that far off to say the same thing about the Buccaneers as well. Both about Jameis Winston and their offense. After Winston getting suspended last year, this is gonna, and a new coach coming in, this is gonna more than likely be a make or break year for him.
Oh, absolutely. All the things we were talking about with Kingsbury before about bringing his own guy in at quarterback, you're going to see the same thing with Arians. Yeah. Arians is going to ride a year. Let's see what I got with Winston. I don't really have much, then it's time for me to look at something else. And next year we're going to target a quarterback. But I think Arians is going to be conservative in the beginning. He's going to try and put together a better Bucks offensive and defensive front to try and win the games that way. Look for a running back for the Bucks. They're going to look for some sort of 3-down power back who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So running back like I had a name earlier, now I forgot it just now. This is what happens if you do zero show prep. You just come on the air and just start talking.
Oh, Alan, that's me every week.
Oh, that's the best part about this show.
He's trying to get me fired from doing.
I was thinking, Josh Jacobs. That was the guy I was thinking of because Damian Harris kept coming to mind, and that's not who I was thinking about. But Josh Jacobs is the kind of guy the Bucks would like to get a hold of if they could get him early in the second round. Let him fall enough because that's the kind of guy that Arians would want to, take the pressure off of Winston and have to do it all. You run the ball, control the clock, keep the opposing offenses, especially an offense like Atlanta or an offense like New Orleans, off the field with a good ground game. Now, of course, playing against New Orleans, they got a good run defense. That's not the best plan in the world, but that's all he's got right now.
Yeah, I agree completely. Let me ask you guys this: what would you? And I'll pose this to Kyle first. If you have to look at this draft, the Saints draft as a whole entity, what would you consider to be the one thing that the Saints absolutely must accomplish via this draft?
Good question. It would have to be, we don't have any critical needs. It has to be somebody that can come in and provide the depth that's going to be necessary for the next 3 to 4 years. Okay. And I think with every selection, if you look at last year, they selected those 2 cornerbacks and defensive backs guys. Didn't make the team for us, but eventually they made somebody's squad. Right?
Yeah.
So the Saints front office did do a good job picking some talent. Unfortunately, they picked it for someone else.
Yeah.
But that meant, the positive thing that meant for us is that we had very good talent on our end where it was impossible for those guys to beat somebody out. I think going into this season, it's the same way. Now, let's say Paris Campbell, Alan, he does fall to the Saints. Or where the Saints, because Sean likes the wheel and deal, where he can possibly jump up and see an opportunity somewhere to be able to select a guy like that. I think right there you would have an excellent pick. Now, we don't have anybody else in the 3rd round, right? So therefore, everybody else who's coming afterward has to be picks where it's going to provide depth on either the line or, either one of the lines, offensive or defensive, or it could be a tight end. Other than that, I think I'll be happy. Let's just make sure that second round pick has to be somebody where if they're not going to make an immediate impact, they will be there to provide the depth that we need in case they need to show up sometime this season.
I totally agree with all that. My thing is, I'm looking at this team. Ted Ginn Jr. is a free agent after next year. This is his last year of his deal. Cameron Meredith, we don't know what we have. Tre'Quan Smith's got to take a step up. We don't know if he can do that yet or not. Keith Kirkwood's the only other name really on this roster who's any kind of really playing experience. We saw the problem last year with relying too much on Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara to carry this offense. I want a receiver that can take the top off this defense. And if Ted Ginn can help out and do that too, that's even better because Jeffrey Henderson and Robert Meacham both were great for us. So I think wide receiver is the critical need. If there's a critical need, that's the one position I really want filled. I know a lot of people are looking at Sheldon Rankins' injury right now, and we need a three-technique defensive tackle because we don't know what's going to happen with David Onyemata because of the misdemeanor, arrest summons he got for marijuana possession. The problem you have is Rankins will come back this year, and even if Onyemata is suspended, he's coming back too. So if you take a defensive tackle in the second round, what happens when these two players start to come back? Where does he play now? If you can get a defensive tackle who can play defensive end somewhat, maybe then you could kind of push Hendrickson out and have this guy back up Cam Jordan, on one side, but also play defensive tackle for you. I don't know. That's the only other really need area. The other stuff is like what y'all just said. It's depth, depth at tight end, depth at cornerback, depth at safety, depth at linebacker, depth at inside on the offensive line, the center and the guard area. Tackle, all those things. See how those guys play out.
You guys all made great points, and I can't and don't disagree with any of them. As far as what I think that the Saints must and will do with their first selection, be it at 62 or whether they juggle and move up a little bit higher, so be it. The words I'm going to say are contingency plan. And here's why I say this. A.J. Klein carries an extremely high salary. And even if they keep him after the June 1st post-cut deadline, and I think that's 50-50 right now, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent next year. Von Bell is an unrestricted free agent this year, and Marcus Williams took a step or two back from his rookie campaign. Yeah. Teron Armstead has been injury prone. We don't know what we're going to get out of Cameron Meredith, and Ted Ginn's much, much closer to the end than he is at the beginning. Just like everything you, Alan, and Kyle pointed out at the receiving position. So many questions with Traquan Smith and what can Keith Kirkwood give you. Jared Cook, he's in his 10th or 11th NFL season. He's 32 years old, still playing at a high level, but probably a little bit past his prime now. Or at least in it. I say all that for this reason. The Saints, and we know that Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis and all those scouts, they have their wish list, and it's a short list of names, be it 5, 10, whatever it is, where they say we will get one of these guys. And I think that's where their first selection is going to have to come from. I'm not necessarily ready to say, I'm not going to sit here and say it has to be a safety, or it has to be a wide receiver, or it has to be a tight end. Any of that. So we can make cases for all those, and all you guys make great cases of that. But this is why, Sean, you were saying earlier, it's going to be it doesn't have to be, but it's going to be the best player available, because they identified everything that you guys all pointed out and that I just ran down the list of. Now, the reason why I say contingency plan, all those contracts that are coming up, in addition to Michael Thomas next year, Breeze's and Bridgewater's contract situation, potentially Ramczyk, Warford, Kamara in 2 years. They're looking at these guys and they're saying, I need a guy. If we cannot sign Von Bell, or if Marcus Williams doesn't progress to where we need to, what safety can I get sitting at number 62 or wherever right now that's going to step in and not only be a contributor this year, like you said, Sean, but as a contingency plan to step in for these guys and or the future, the next 4 to 5 years at this position. And that's why I don't necessarily think that they're going to go wide receiver. I would love to see Paris Campbell or Terry McLaurin or even a Deebo Samuel in this offense. I really would. But guys, you look at it this way, and I'm just only going to pick on the wide receiver spot for one quick second. Paris Campbell, Andy Isabella, Terry McLaurin, Kevin Harmon from NC State, Keneal Henry, Debo Samuel, Emmanuel Hall, Riley Ridley, and Hakeem Butler. Those are 8 wide receivers, all of whom have been connected with the Saints somehow at pick 62. Now, all 8 of those won't be available at 62, but probably 4, 5, 6 of them most likely will be. And this is for another topic, but later in the draft, there's a list of just as almost equally talented wide receivers. My point is, I think they can get a playmaking wide receiver a little later on. Now, if they've identified a Paris Campbell or an Irv Smith at tight end, and they start to drop a little bit where they can go and get them, we know Sean Payton is aggressive enough that that's exactly what they're going to do. And I think that, I know the Saints are without a first-round draft choice this year, but I think that this draft is as intriguing, if not more so, than any of the other Saints drafts in recent history because of how many options, not only player-wise, but movement-wise, that could happen. And I think all of us, mentally, even if we're not revealing them quite yet, all of us have our dark horses at where potential surprises that we think the Saints could pull at 62 or somewhere in the second or even late first round. I know I got us to Mexico through Europe, but I hope that helped a little bit.
No, that's good. All good stuff. Sean,
Yes, sir.
your thoughts. Sounds like you listen to children's music.
I'll blame it on Will.
Yeah, probably so. Did Sean just freeze?
I think so.
His new theme song is "If You Don't Want Me To" by Ronnie Millsap, The Freeze, because that's what he seems to do more often than not. And here you broadcast in the bathroom. You should be fine.
Well, you haven't heard the flush yet. So.
No, we have not heard the flush. I have to give you credit for that. That's good.
Now, what was your question? I apologize.
My question is, what do you think the Saints have to come out with in this draft?
I agree with what you guys have pointed out so far. Wide receiver is, and this is a point that Alan has made so many times on here, going down the stretch of the season last year, we needed more wide receiver help than Michael Thomas. We needed that tight end. Yes, I won't argue that point. But as the season wore on, the only dependable target that Breeze had down the field was Mike Thomas. And how many times did you see him with no alternative but to go to Mike Thomas in double coverage and triple coverage? Of course, the majority of the time he came down with it. That's not the point. But it's only going to get worse from here because people are studying him and they got film on him. And, you need someone that prevents them from double teaming and triple teaming Michael Thomas. And Jared Cook is a step in the right direction. He's a decent addition if he's going to be able to make a solid contribution, which I'm still up in the air on that. But I would say that probably the position of greatest need for the Saints right now would more than likely be a good, solid, dependable number 2 wide receiver.
Hey, I know Kyle's got to go really quick. Kyle, is any last minute stuff you want us to know about? We know about the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night, but anything else that's going on that you want us to know about?
No, man. Look, Saints fans, just be ready for a good second round. I think the Saints. Yeah, Bob, you and I talked about this, and Alan and Sean. Don't be surprised if Mr. Sean Payton gets into that first round some way, somehow. That's all I'm saying.
I can see that.
I can fully expect it.
Yeah.
Ralph Marlborough has been saying on the radio on Twitter. I mean, if at 25 a guy the Saints really like is there, Loomis has now entered the chat.
Exactly.
He will be looking.
Yeah. Well, guys, you guys have a great night. Bob, see you tomorrow. And hopefully you guys can join us on our show on tomorrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank
Looking
you so
forward to
much,
it. Thank you,
Kyle.
Kyle, for being on the show.
All right, guys. Who dat? Take care.
Who that? All right. So I agree. I agree with everything's been said so far. You know, I just wanted to say this real quick, and then we'll wrap it up tonight. I'm the kind of guy that goes to the car dealership with the idea I'm buying a truck, but I'm gonna look at those sports cars first. I gotta test drive one of them things first. You know, so I'm always gonna go for the flashy offensive players, even though I know we need to have depth everywhere. All the positions you talked about, Bob. Exactly. I mean, I still have in my back of my mind, Eric Berry is still out there to come in, you know, in free agency after the draft. I would love to have him on the team. But that being said, I still want the oh shit player for in the receiving core. And I call him the oh shit player because that's exactly what defensive backs should be saying. When that guy takes off in the go route and he sees Breeze pump to the right and all of a sudden go back to his side and he's just going, oh shit, because that guy's gone. And you know, that's what I want, because there's nothing more enjoyable than watching the Saints get at midfield and Breeze just letting it fly for the big play. I love that. So that's why I'm hooked on Paris Campbell right now. I won't be upset with any of the other receivers we've mentioned tonight, but Paris Campbell's my guy right now, and we'll see what happens from there.
And you guys know me. I'm a track guy, so I always look at. I love breaking down the skill position players, particularly wide receiver and cornerback, because those are where the fastest players usually stick out, as long as they have any football ability whatsoever. The only reason, like I said, I would love to see a Paris Campbell. And I like Terry McLaurin a lot too. He's only a tick or two slower than Paris, and he's a much more refined route runner. So I would be satisfied with either one of these guys in the Saints offense. And I like it, not necessarily at 62, but I like Andy Isabella a lot too.
Yeah.
And those guys would lend a lot to this offense. Don't get me wrong. When I was kind of breaking down and doing my player profiles, I did a lot of guys that'll probably go on day 3, and I won't be shy. I fell in love with a couple wide receivers there too. A few of them can really set a stopwatch on its heels too. So I don't disagree with you, Alan, or what you said, Sean. I do think that the Saints need to come away with a bona fide receiving threat that could at least develop into a number 2, if not be so right away. I just think that they could potentially do it at a later round than round 2. It might mean moving into a round 3 or a round 4. Kyle said it before he went off of the air. We know Sean and Mickey have their list of players, and we know that they met with Paris Campbell, and we know that they met with Terry McLaurin too. They could be on that list. Where if those guys, especially Campbell, he's been projected to go late in some first rounds. So if these starts to drop where the Saints feel like it's within striking distance at whatever pick they circled, be it 25, 30, 44, don't be surprised to move up to get him. I don't disagree with Kyle at all.
Yeah, I agree too. I think that's a very likely scenario. Sean, any last thoughts before we get off the air?
No, not really. Thank everybody for joining us tonight. We appreciate y'all as always. Once again, invite you guys to subscribe to our show on iTunes and on YouTube. Bob, before we go, give us the breakdown on the Bayou Blitz tomorrow night.
Well, fans of Under the Dome, and I know that I hope anyway that there's a lot of crossovers that watch Under the Dome and listen to Kyle and I on Wednesday nights too, the Bayou Blitz, because we will have Sean Williams and Alan Ulrich on as part 2 of our draft coverage. That's kind of why you didn't necessarily hear any specific draft predictions from us, because we're going to make this into a 2-night coverage. So the 3 of us plus Mr. Mosley, who skipped out on us a little bit early tonight, will be back on tomorrow night on the Bayou Blitz at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 Central, either through the Saints News Network or through the Spreaker app and or www.saintspodcast.com. If you haven't checked out the Bayou Blitz, hopefully you'll check us out tomorrow night for part 2 of our draft coverage, and hopefully we can pull a voodoo spell on you to make you fall in love with us too.
There you go. There you go.
That's it.
Well, thank you, Bob, as always, for being on the show. As usual, your articles are fantastic, full of information. It's a good draft primer, especially for people like me who can't always get out in the stores and buy the magazines. They're good. They're a good draft primer on a lot of players. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week tomorrow night on your show, and we'll see you next time on Under the Dome, where we'll do the post-draft breakdown and what the Saints did right, what they did wrong, and what they still need. Until next time, good night, everybody.